Euzubillahimineşşeytanirracim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Rabbi şrah li sadri ve yessir li emri ve hlul ukdeten min lisani yefkahu kavli. Allahümme salli ala seyyidina Muhammed ve ala ali seyyidina. Selamun aleyküm ve rahmetullahi ve berekatuhu. Inshallah, we will continue our discussion on divine determining and power of choice, qadr and cüz-i ihtiyar. And we will continue from the 26th word. Last week we concluded the first topic, although there were a few paragraphs, maybe sentences, that our previous moderator wanted to discuss, continue discussing. But because I was handed the office of moderation in last minute, I'm using my power as a means of taking revenge and continue from the second topic, inshallah, if this is okay for everyone, okay with everyone. So I will start reading the second topic, but because this part will be hard, not because, I don't trust you or anything, but mostly because I don't trust myself. And the author made an interesting note here saying, oh, it's not here. Okay. Unfortunately, I have to do this. So it puts a note here. It says the second topic is the most profound and difficult of the questions of the mystery of divine determining. So take this as a warning. When you buy a DVD, you see this FBI warning at the beginning. So imagine such a green screen and the FBI logo. And it's saying that the second topic is the most profound and difficult of the questions of the mystery of divine determining. What the eagle on his one hand holding this sentence and the second hand holding, it is held by the all learned scholars to be one of the most important and controversial questions of theology and belief. So I don't think I need to say more. But this part will be hard. And the author says this is a minute and scholarly investigation addressing scholars in particular. So this is mostly for people like Ayşenur, because she is the only scholar, to my knowledge, among us, who's we all are studying this topic to learn something, to help ourselves and so on. But she is doing it as a profession. So she is a scholar. Alhamdulillah, we have scholars like her among us. So this also means we will need her a lot. And there are also others, I don't know how to translate in English. I would say self-trained or educated. I don't know what is the right word there. Scholars among us as well. But, we cannot trust them that much. Okay, let's start with the second topic. After I hear your questions, comments about what we studied so far. So please help Yusuf, because if nobody speaks, I will most obviously and certainly hand the microphone to him to give us a short summary. So please help him. Okay, Yusuf, do you mind give us a a very short summary of what we studied so far, because the second topic, since it will be hard, I guess it will be better that we know where we are, just locate ourselves and so on.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Of course, if you like, don't take it as a obligation. I don't want to put any pressure on you. Jazakallah khairan.
So so far what we have been discussing was, first of all, in what context we are going to study the topic of qadar and the juz-i ikhtiyari, like divine determining and the power of choice. The author didn't start from the question, how is divine determining compatible with the power of choice? Because when the matter is this question is the first question that comes to mind. But the author started with saying that in what context having such a conversation is meaningful. Otherwise, he said, even don't waste your time. And the context that he drew was, you start with, like the believer starts attributing everything to the creator. So sun, moon, seasons, life, everything. But then it comes to a point where, how about the good actions that I did? Or it's also the creators. So fruitful, nice things that happen at my hand. But then, so I shouldn't be proud of it. But then comes the point of, how about the bad things? Like responsibility about bad things. So the author says this is where the discussion about power of choice would pop up, and you would assume, you would accept responsibility for the evil doings. And whenever you see something good coming into existence, you would say, oh, it is at the hands of the divine determining. It is from the creator's will and power. So, he put a further warning saying that this discussion is not on the basis of, when it comes to good things, I say, yeah, I did them. They were my choices, my creation. And when bad things happen, I say, oh yeah, God willed it to be so. So the responsibility for the evil is being sent to God, but the credit for good things being sent to my free choice or power of choice. The author says this discussion of qadar is a discussion or a matter of a belief which is at hal, like it's a state and conscience. It's not some theoretical conversation that you would have. So if to the extent that the believer reaches this conscience and then this state of attributing everything to the creator, then the topic of qadar and the juz-i ikhtiyari, power of choice, becomes meaningful. Otherwise, it's not a philosophical matter in which you are trying to answer the question that now we are reading. How is divine determining compatible with the power of choice? So this was the intro so far. And in there, he made a few remarks saying that, so we said, why shall I not attribute good things to myself, yet attribute the evil to myself? The author talked about this as well. He said, because the good, like the creation of good and also willing of good, both comes from the creator. As for the evil, he says, the creation of evil is not evil. This was his point, because he said, when you choose evil from your point of view, you're truly willing some evil. So you are responsible for that. But when the creator also adheres to your choice, let's say, says, okay, I'm going to create what you chose, but the creator's choice of that same thing is considering the whole creation. So one creation has multifacets. So this is why all those other aspects of it, which makes it good in this sense. So creation of evil is not evil, but the choice of evil was evil. This was one of the major things. And the other one was choice of good, like willing to do goodness, right, is being given to you. And also the creation of good is being given to you by the creator. So nothing for you to really be proud of in there, because everything is being outsourced in a sense. And for that, we talked about one question. And the question was, or one example, it was, so yeah, overall, the idea was, the whole point is human is getting trained in this existence. And let's say the professor, this was the example, I guess, that was clarifying many things. The professor is asking you questions, giving you multiple choice answers. And the professor have already taught you what the correct answer was during the class time. And now he is making an exam to you so that you can reiterate what you learned and practice it. Let's say there's one question, there are 5 choice answers. One of the answers are correct. Some of the answers are seemingly correct, but incorrect. So if you say, I chose the correct answer, so how good I am, the professor says, no, I taught you how to choose it, what the correct answer was. So all credit goes to me. And if you talk about how beautiful the question was, I designed the question, I designed the correct answer, and the other answers in there, so that even choosing that answer is going to be a learning experience for you. But on the other hand, if I choose the wrong answer, then the teacher would say, it's your responsibility. Despite me teaching you the right answer and how to choose it and everything, you went ahead and chose the wrong answer. So you are responsible for this wrongdoing, but for giving the correct answer, you were supposed to give it anyways, because everything for you, everything was given to you to give the correct answer. Not doing it properly would make you responsible. So I guess in a nutshell, this clearly, to a certain extent, at least to me, answers all those questions about why I shall not be proud of the good that comes out of my hand, yet be responsible for the evil that comes out of my hand. So in a nutshell, I think that's it. If I missed anything, please go ahead.
Jazakallah khairan. That was a beautiful summary. And maybe one thing we can emphasize that these share that, you know, the good deeds goes to the creator, bad deeds or the evil goes to you choices. It's not something for, I don't know how to say, but the author, the way author explained it, it was a descriptive explanation, meaning that this is the case. The author was not suggesting us a social norm or you know, a proper way to place ourselves in front of our Lord out of choice. The author was saying that this is the case that you should be aware of. I guess one example is you find yourself in a palace and all the beautiful things is given to you or are given to you. You are there to enjoy the meals, enjoy the artworks and everything. And you are free to enjoy them. And the owner of the palace only asks you not to break anything or not to spoil anything. That's the only thing that you are asked for. Hence, all the beauties within this palace, you cannot take any responsibility, you cannot take any authorship or ownership, sorry. But when you break something, you are blameworthy. So in such a scenario, for instance, it's not something that, you know, this share between good and the bad is imposed externally, in which, you know, you have a choice of not accepting it or accepting it. It's more like this is the fact, like you either accept it or just deny it. Another point, as Yusuf already mentioned, so we will see some examples in the second topic as well, that the author told us that when you study this topic, again, first, it is better that you let's say that you already digested certain ideas, certain concepts, and you are following a certain methodology up to this point. So if you have some doubts about the creator, if you have some doubts about the prophet, angels, books, you may have difficulty understanding this topic in its own scope. So do not expect that you will study this topic and you will understand it, even if you have some questions, or even if you have some problems with other pillars of belief. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't study at all, and it doesn't mean that you have to wait until coming to a certain degree of, the scholarship. But at least it means that you may have some difficulty in studying this topic, and it is normal, it is expected. You will have these difficulties because, just like everyone else, your basis about the pillars of the belief are not that solid, just like anyone else who's studying this topic. So I see it more like a what is it called? Not the circular, but there's a model in software development or any kind of development. Actually, is the spiral. Like you study things, come to a certain degree, and then study qadar, and then you realize that there are missing points. You go back to study other things again in a better way, and then come back to qadar, and then go back, and then come back. In this spiral, you should imagine yourself. So when you have difficulties in understanding this topic, question yourself, like, what kind of missing points I have regarding other pillars of belief. So the third thing I would like to say, the first thing was, the share between good and evil is the fact, not something you not something that it would be nice if you accept. The second is how qadar should be taken as an end point to other pillars of the belief. And the third thing, Yusuf also mentioned this as well, is that when you study this topic, it is from time to time, at least, about your conscience and your state. Just put them into the equation as well. Use them, rely on them. Yusuf, please go ahead.
So one example that for that point, which we were talking about that today with someone. So for example, at the very beginning of Quran, in Surah Baqarah, there's this verse which says, إِنَّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا سَوَاءٌ عَلَيْهِمْ أَنذَرْتَهُمْ أَمْ لَمْ تُنذِرْهُمْ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. So indeed, those unbelievers like kafir, for them it's the same whether you warn them or you don't warn them, they will not believe. And then says, ختم الله على قلوبهم وعلى سمعهم وعلى أبصارهم غشاوة ولهم عذاب عظيم. So God put a seal on their hearts, on their ears, and on their eyes are a shroud that covers up, and for them is a big pain. Big pain. So if you read this verse, for example, as saying that, oh, God is already sealing their hearts, this is why they cannot believe. So how are they responsible then, right? Like if you read it as talking about a person who is prevented from believing, and even if you tell them, they cannot believe because as if they are hardwired not to believe. But you cannot read Quran like that. I mean, it is against the definition of Quran. So if somebody comes up with such an understanding for this verse, you would say, well, wait a second. This sentence cannot be read in this context because this is speech of God. And just a few verses before, the Creator said that, ذَلِكَ الْكِتَابُ لَا رَيْبَ فِيهِ هُدًى لِلْمُتَّقِينَ. This is an undoubtful book, and it's a guidance for the God conscious. So if you are not God conscious, and if you are not in the expectation of a guidance, and just read this sentence as if a man is saying it, then you're totally reading it wrong. So rather than starting to talk about the sentence and its grammatic structure and whatnot, you would say, no, wait a second, we need to go back, define the context of the message, and then talk about the message. The same thing is happening in here. The author is saying that the discussion of qadar is meaningful only within a certain context. If you are discussing this outside of this context, it's simply nonsensical. This topic makes sense and is made to be discussed within this context only. This is why, as you were saying, if I don't have this state or conscience, and then still start trying to talk about qadar, you would tell me that no, this topic is not to be considered in this context. So it's not like, what do you mean? Like a topic is topic, I can discuss it anywhere. It is not, and we know that, just as the example I gave, the same thing applies to qadar.
Oh, I would say the same thing applies to everything. Because like the discussions are, or studying a certain topic is meaningful only within a certain context. Sometimes this context is so relaxed and so easy to, let's say, establish. So in most of our discussions, we take it as granted. But once we start studying a certain sophisticated topic, let's say topics, it is obvious that it should be studied in a certain context, which is not easy to, establish. So you should spend some time to have the proper context and proper attitude and so on. So I guess these rules are not something that Yusuf, or poor Yusuf, making up to how to say, to convince people about his authorship or the authority. Sorry, that Yusuf telling this only to tell us that, oh, you cannot study this. It's only me that have the proper attitude and the context, so I can study this alone. So this is not the case. As I said, like this, the importance of the context, the importance of the attitude, importance of the time of discussion is there for every topic. Of course, if we are into to gain something, to gain a guidance, teach us something out of this discussion. Otherwise, if you are into a political discussion, or if you are approaching any topic from a political angle, you are there just to, say stuff and argue, or just to satisfy your the desires, convince yourself you're right. And yeah, you don't need to worry about the context, your attitude, the previous topics that you should be discussing or studying, and so on. Okay, after all these warnings, let's start with second topic, after waiting for a few seconds for Abdurrahman in case he has some questions. Okay, that was enough. Second topic. Yallah. This is a minute and scholarly investigation addressing scholars in particular. If you say, how is divine determining compatible with the power of choice? So that's the crux of the problem, right? So this is what makes this divine determining power of choice difficult to study. Otherwise, when we take the divine determining by itself, I said it is obvious that, yes, everything in the creation is created in front of us, following some, as if guidelines, following some rules, following a bigger plan, let's say, or a local small plan, which is compatible with a bigger plan. So it is easy to see all this order, balance, the wisdom, knowledge in the creation. So divine determining by itself is not, at least to me, it's theoretically speaking, let's say, it doesn't seem that hard to comprehend. The same way, the power of choice. I do have power of choice. Yeah, end of question, because I know it. Like, I know that I have power of choice. So by itself, it's not that hard to comprehend. But when it comes to put them together, how divine determining is compatible with the power of choice, or how power of choice is possible when everything is being created, then things become complicated to me. The answer, author says, in 7 ways. So I like to suggest something to make our discussion and study even more productive. But this is just a personal study. Although I am the moderator, I have all the power in the world within this discussion. I can force people to speak a certain way, but I don't want to utilize my power. So take it as a suggestion. I would suggest that since author, put an effort to divide the answer into multiple parts, I assume he had the wisdom there. So I would suggest when we study any part, let's say the first part, let's try to understand this part by itself first. Of course, we will, as we study, we will make connections between them. But while studying the first part, let's try to concentrate understanding what it is said there, rather than in every part trying to answer how divine determining compatible with the power of choice in its entirety. Yeah, Birkan, I understand what you say in the first part, but how it is compatible when you think that way? So these kind of questions, I guess, we can postpone until the part among the 7 comes. So this is just a suggestion. With this suggestion in hand and in our minds, let's start reading the first, inshallah. The all just and wise one, to whose wisdom and justice the universe testifies, with the tongue of order and balance. All just and wise one. And then author puts a comma and says, these are not just the names. Let me explain how we know that he is all just and wise. To whose wisdom and justice the universe testifies, with the tongue of order and balance. So when you look at the creation, when you look at the universe, you will realize that in every creation, there's balance and order. And from that, you will know that the creator of all these things are the all just and wise. Gave to men, or a human being, gave to human a power of choice of unknown nature. Gave to human a power of choice of unknown nature, which would be the means of reward and punishment for them. Power of choice of unknown nature. So for this part, author says, let's assume, this is an assumption actually, let's state the obvious. The power of choice there, it is given. So we should study this part. We should discuss the power of choice, whether it is there or not, whether it is given or not. And he says, its nature is unknown. I accept that, he says. But its utility is known, because we know that through this power of choice, we find ourselves in a state of reward and a state of punishment. So these parts all needs to be discussed. We do not know many of the numerous aspects of the all just and the wise one's wisdom. Yes, we can experience the wisdom. We can experience certain aspects of this wisdom, but not all of them. And actually, many of these aspects, we don't know. We know their existence. We have some glimpse of them, so it's not blind faith. But we cannot say that I comprehended the wisdom of the all just, wisdom and the justice of all just and wise one. We cannot say that. He continues, our not knowing how the power of choice is compatible with divine determining does not prove that it is not so. So this is interesting. Like the author says, okay, let's first establish some facts. We know, which he will explain in the second part more, that we know we have power of choice. We know it is given. We know it is there as a means of reward and punishment, or as Yusuf said at the beginning, as a means of training, education, which is your sole purpose in life anyway. We know all these facts. We also know that we do not know the nature of power of choice. And we also know our lack of understanding in the vast wisdom and justice of the all just and the wise one. And just because we don't understand how divine determining and power of choice is compatible, just because we don't know that, it doesn't mean they are not compatible, or it doesn't mean that they are incompatible. Probably. So that's, I guess, easy to understand, at least to put in sentence, but let's discuss, inshallah. So I see a comment from Ayşenur. Ayşenur, would you like me to read it, or would you like to read and maybe elaborate later?
Assalamu alaikum. I don't know if I'll elaborate, but I was just going to, like, the thought that came to me in response to this first point was that, quote, I can conclude that the creator of this existence must by necessity be absolutely just and absolutely wise, right? But I cannot have complete access, or I cannot have complete comprehension of an absolute by virtue, definitionally, by the fact that it is absolute. So I guess there's that difference between being able to conclude a significant fact about something, but at the same time be able to acknowledge that one does not have access. I mean, I'm just repeating myself. I mean, I'm also repeating what Nursey's writing here, but yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Jazakallah khairan. And that's a very valid point. I guess beyond something being absolute, even for non-absolute stuff, sometimes we know that they both exist, and we don't know how they can exist in the same time or how they are compatible. We don't understand that. But just because we don't understand, it doesn't mean it is wrong, or it doesn't mean that they cannot come together. Nazmu says, existence of wisdom must indicate a perfect form of it somewhere. Existence of wisdom must indicate a perfect form of it somewhere. I'm not like I have some understanding of this. I'm not sure I fully follow the question, so I don't want to, do injustice to your beautiful question, Nazmu. So if you are available to speak, I would really appreciate if you can. Yeah.
Okay, so Assalamu alaikum. My question was just a follow-up to what was said just a few minutes ago. Even if we can't experience perfect wisdom, wouldn't us experiencing even, let's say, 1% or 2% wisdom, it must mean that there has to be some type of whatever it is, there has to be some type of perfect wisdom somewhere, right? Like, for example, if you see a river, it must indicate there's an ocean somewhere, because, or else where's the origin of the water, right? Or it must indicate there's mountain somewhere, whatever it may be. So that's what I was trying to say. And the river example, what I'm trying to say with that is, there's a small amount of water flowing from somewhere, and even though you can't encompass your mind to believing that there's an ocean somewhere, and that you can't process that with your mind, but it must mean that there is some type of ocean somewhere, right? So I just wanted you guys' thoughts on that.
Jazakallah khairan. So I understand. So within the within creation. So if we are thinking within the creation, then I would say your argument doesn't necessarily hold just within the creation, because I could say that, in this creation, there's something which is, I can find a few things which are very scarce, very, rare, and not necessarily, again, within the creation, we would have a vast amount of it. So I think, again, within the creation, it doesn't necessarily follow, I would say.
Maybe my example was wrong. It's not indicating a vastness, but a perfect a perfect instance of that thing. So for example, the existence of gold, it necessitates that there is a there is a perfect sample of gold somewhere, right? So even if the gold is mixed together with rocks or debris or whatever, in theory, there is a perfect sample of gold somewhere that the gold can, that, I don't know if you get the example now, but
No,
I don't.
I got the example, but like when you say somewhere, this where part makes, I guess, the things are complicated. Because again, within the creation, it is a possibility that every instance of golds are not pure. We're talking about, the facts, the empirical facts, let's say. Things becomes meaningful when you think about their source, but not within the creation, not within the universe. Like when I say source, it's not about the mine, gold mine, the source of their existence. And hence, it becomes a different kind of argument. So when I look at the universe, it's not like, I would say at least, I see Yusuf raised his hand. I would say it's not like I observe universe, I look at the universe, I see some instances of wisdom, and I say just from that, and I say, oh, there must be a perfect wisdom, or there must be infinite wisdom somewhere. I don't think this is the case. Like when I look at every instance of wisdom, when I carefully study it, I realize it goes beyond the limitation of my mind. Every instance of wisdom. And I say, whatever their source is, it's not something, out of the type of this nature, this creation. So this the perfection and the absoluteness, it is somehow, indicated within every instance of the wisdom or justice. Yusuf, go ahead, please.
Jazakallah khair. I mean, actually, the point that you made clearly explains everything. Maybe just one point. When we talk about perfect, the word itself is causing us trouble because, let's say, I ate a perfect apple, we say. So we use it in daily language. And we imagine a perfect apple exists in this creation. So, and when we talk about perfect wisdom, as if we imagine it as something tastable, observable. But when we talk about all-knowing, all-just, all-wise, what is meant is, I do observe wisdom in the existence, in the creation, and I am concluding that this wisdom is not by itself here. It is being outsourced, if you like. What is the source of this wisdom? And I do not find the source of this wisdom in here. Like when I see apple to be wise or some wisdom being manifest in the apple, but I do not find the source of wisdom that's being manifest in the apple at the apple tree. So since I cannot find its source in the existence, therefore I say there must exist the source of wisdom, which I observe in here, but that source of wisdom is absolute. So this is why the word perfect, since we are using it for within the creation as well, when we talk about perfect wisdom for the creator, we might imagine as if it's a quantifiable, but very large number, but still quantifiable, like countably infinite, to use a mathematical term. So it's not like that though. We are talking about absolute, meaning undefinable in any shape or form. So this is why in Nazmu's wording, the example he gave was limited because it's an example within the creation. But otherwise, the way you explained this makes perfect sense. Jazakallah khair.
So this is definitely not our topic today, but so when when we say like we don't find the source in the universe, it may sound as if, but Birkan, you didn't look hard enough. Maybe in future you will find it. The Quranic approach is not that way. It's not like, we couldn't find. We actually find that it cannot be within the universe. So it's La ilaha. And the La ilaha, it's like the complete negation, right? When you say La ilaha, what is another example? There's no, you cannot force anyone regarding the religion. There's the ayah for that. La ikraha, yes. La ikraha, the same, the form, right? The absolute negation. La ikraha, not la ikrahan, for instance, ikraha. La ilaha, not la ilahan. Like there's no room for looking for other the creators within this formulation. It's the absolute negation. There cannot be any source within the universe. So it's a positive proof. It's not a negative proof or evidence. It's not like, oh, look at the under this rock. Like it's not under this rock. Oh, how about in my pocket? Oh, it's not in my pocket either. Then you conclude that, oh, it's not there. I looked everywhere, I could. This is not the case. It's La ilaha. Like there cannot be any source within the universe. You come to this conclusion actively in a positive way. So negation is negative. Yes, you negate false creators, but your conclusion is a determined, conclusive one. It's not open-ended. So anyway, Yusuf, please go ahead.
And this conversation is also very important for this topic in general as well, because we are trying to understand the nature of power of choice. Like the question as if implies, if you can scroll up a little bit, the question was asking how is divine determining compatible with the power of choice? So the answer that one would expect for this one is, oh, here is how power of choice works. So here is its machinery. And on the other side, this is the machinery of divine determining. So defining both. And then I say, this is how you would make them compatible. But the author says, divine determining by default is undefinable, first of all, because it's absolute. We are talking about absolute. Like divine knowledge is absolute knowledge, which is you cannot define it in the first place. You can only know its existence, but you cannot define it. Then on the other hand, like this is already given. But now we are reading the first, it says, well, how about defining the nature of power of choice? You cannot even do that either. So author is putting the limitations of us in front of us, first of all, but saying that not being able to define the two does not mean that it does not exist though. Just setting the stage at the level of, do not expect that you will be able to define the nature of both. Divine determining is already undefinable. If it is definable, then it would be of type of creation. But when it comes to power of choice, we don't know how to define it, or we don't know how to describe its nature. I mean, we cannot describe the nature of electricity either, or we cannot describe the nature of soul, describe the nature of consciousness. Yet we know that consciousness exists. We know that
Not even apple, Yusuf. Like we cannot even define the nature of apple.
Yeah, correct, very correct. So, but you know apple exists, you know electricity exists, you know all these exist. So the author is setting the stage, saying that don't seek for the answer in the wrong place. So in this sense, just want to highlight that point. And in general, this is why that conversation is going to be important to distinguish absolute versus perfect, for example. We need to distinguish these two, because eventually divine determining would be what? Divine determining is divine knowledge. If I am imagining divine knowledge to be a perfect knowledge, perfect in the sense of, let's say, I know, I don't know, data structures perfect. But data structures is a topic, let's say, for which we define some boundary. I know English perfect. Like these are the things which are having boundaries within the creation. And if there exists a limit of English, whoever reaches that limit, we would say he has the perfect knowledge of English. But if I'm imagining knowledge of God perfect in this sense, I'm going to be falling into the trap. This is why we need to distinguish absolute knowledge and our general notion of perfect.
Jazakallah khairan. One important point, like when we make all this emphasis on, yes, maybe we don't know its nature, but it doesn't mean that it does not exist and so on. So this, one way or another, this sounds like as if author here is suggesting us to have a blind faith. But in very beginning, the first sentence, author says, no, this is not the way you should approach. You should know that the all just and the wise one exist by looking at the creation, to whose wisdom and justice the universe testifies with the tongue of order and balance. So you should be knowing, you should come to conclusion yourself. Don't take it granted just because I said so. Don't believe me. Look at the creation, look at the universe, and see there that everything testifies its existence. And then ask yourself whether you can, whether you know its nature or not, and you would say, author says, you would say, no, you don't have. I don't have the, I don't understand its nature. And same goes the power of choice. Aisha and Abdurrahman, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, just along that line, I just wanted to add that in the last sentence of, and I know we're trying to take the points as they are, but in the last sentence, when it says, "Are not knowing how the power of choice is compatible with the divine determining, does not prove that it is not so." The third element here is that I can't discount the question or the desire to know that I find in myself, that is created within me, right? And that I want to know how it may be compatible, or else I wouldn't be asking this question. Everyone else wouldn't be asking this question. The fact that this question is asked shows that it is, the desire to know is being given to me. And then as a human being, I would hope that the one who gives the desire to know offers a path to know as well.
I think this is a great point. So the sentences, like we don't know the nature of it and so on, shouldn't be understood as like you won't have any, let's say, better you won't find yourself in a better position, never, ever. They are there to suggest us that this is a journey, go ahead. Yes, theoretically speaking, I won't be able to comprehend everything. In the absolute sense, this is impossibility. I'm a created being. But there are always, there will be always a new aspect that may be revealed to me if I asked for. So this is a kind of encouragement for us. So it is absolute. You cannot know means there are a lot that you can learn. There are a lot that you can understand. It's infinite treasure. More you study, more you will understand, more you will appreciate. But yes, you won't find yourself in a position that you comprehend it as it is, as a whole, and whatever it means. But your journey is endless. That's what I understand. Okay, any other comments, question? Atik and Atik, do you have anything to say, or can we continue with the second?
Yeah, nothing from me. You can continue.
Okay. How about from Atik, your other partner?
Yeah, he's good too.
Okay, Jazakallah. The second, of necessity, everyone perceives of necessity. Everyone perceives in themselves a will and choice. They know it through their conscience. That's really important. Everyone perceives a will and choice. And they know it through their conscience. To know the nature of beings is one thing. To know the nature of beings is one thing. To know they exist is something different. To know the nature of beings is one thing. To know they exist is something different. There are many things which, although their existence is self-evident, we don't know their true nature. The power of choice may be included among these. Everything is not restricted to what we know. Our not knowing them does not prove the things we do not know do not exist. So that's interesting. Again, author is not talking about a blind faith, because he's giving some part, at least it's due, it's the fact that we can know them, which is existence. You can experience it, you can you can experience them, you can study them, you can count their numbers, you can look at their color, look at, measure their conductivity, measure their weight, or whatever. You can do things, but it doesn't mean that you have to, or you can even know their language, their nature. And just because you cannot know their nature, don't also deny their existence. So this may sound very obvious, right? Like there are many things that we don't know their nature, and depending on your, depending on the topic or the object that we are talking here, this unknowing the state could be temporary or permanent. So maybe you are not educated enough, so you don't get the nature. Maybe you are not clever enough, you won't get the nature. That could be the case, but sometimes there are also some theoretical limits to our knowledge as well. And it is, I guess, easy to understand, accept that. But we also see some examples, especially among so-called intellectuals. They study things, they cannot figure out how it exists, and they deny. They say, oh, do you know what? This sense of the power of choice, it's nothing but illusion. Why? Because I cannot include it in my book. Because in my laboratory, we were not able to study it. We tried to study, but our results were contradictory to reality or our experiences. So as an authority, because I have my title, like look at the things in front of my name, at least 3 different titles you will see, and I have the authority to claim its non-existence. We see these examples. It's really funny. Although it sounds very reasonable when we listen or read it with a piece of a peaceful state of mind. Any comments here?
Yeah, I just have a small thing to say. Maybe we should also broaden the definition of knowing, right? Because I think there are certain things you can intellectually know, but there are other things that you can only know through experience, and you can't really go into them intellectually. And an example is free choice. I mean, whether you're a believer or not, it doesn't really matter. You have to contend with the fact that you do have choice. So it doesn't even matter it doesn't matter who you are, you still act and live and experience choice, regardless of your belief. So in that sense, like, you can quote unquote know about free choice, but it's just not in an intellectual way. I don't know if that's a correct line of thought. I wonder what you guys think.
Jazakallah khairan. Any comments on that? Or any other parts? Otherwise, we can continue with the third. Suhail says, I agree. The power of choice is not opposed to divine determining. Indeed, divine determining corroborates the power of choice. Because divine determining is a sort of divine knowledge. Because divine determining is a sort of divine knowledge. Divine knowledge is connected with our will and choice. Divine knowledge is connected with our will and choice, in which case it corroborates it. It does not nullify it. Okay, I'm kind of lost. Who wants to help me here? So the first part is easy to understand. Not, I'm talking about the grammatical structure, the English-wise. It is easy to understand. The power of choice is not opposed to divine determining. Indeed, divine determining corroborates the power of choice. Because divine determining is a sort of divine knowledge. Divine knowledge is connected with our will. Divine knowledge is connected with our will and choice. in which case it corroborates it, it does not nullify it. Suhail, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. At least what I took away from this is that the fact that, I think several regards. One, the fact that I know things must be determined, or in other words, willed to exist. There's some sort of choice or will for something to be rather than not, and then to be as it is with its own particular essence and then qualities it manifests. For example, I am who I am, you are who you are, everybody is as they are. So is everything around us, all things in creation as they are. There's a choice behind that. In some sense, the fact that I know that there is a choice behind that is a testimony to my choice, because I'm choosing to know that or make a judgment about that. In other words, that's an expression of my will to make that conclusion. That's in one regard. And in another regard, it also demonstrates that will manifests on the face of the universe. In other words, will is a quality or the ability to choose or to determine things. It's something that's manifested on the face of creation. For some things, much more than others. For example, the human being is the most notable example of creation, which can make a choice compared to, let's say, animals or even plants, like when they grow to the sun. That's in a sense like their limited choice. Like that's how they're created to be, but it's not like they choose to go away from the growing to the sun. As he goes on to say, because divine determining is a sort of divine knowledge is connected with our will and choice. In other words, I can only choose something that I know. Like I can't choose something that I'm not aware of if it's not within my options that I'm aware of. For example, if I didn't know chocolate ice cream happens to be, it would never be one of my choices. I would only maybe pick vanilla or strawberry or something, because it's my knowledge in that regard is limited. The fact that I can know something again for myself is also an expression of will, because the fact I know something, I choose to know it in some sense. For example, if I go and explore something to know, or I encounter or experience something, I'm making a choice. And while it's not completely my choice to remember, I am choosing in some sense to become aware of the world. Some part of that is outside of my realm of choice, but by and large, like when I choose to learn something, that's my knowledge of the world, and I'm making a choice also. And my choices are informed by what I know at the end of the day. I can only choose something from within my paradigm of knowledge. Similarly, that points to then his will, and therefore his divine knowledge as well, his absolute knowledge. So I mean, I guess to sum it up, the world simply it's not, oh, he has divine knowledge and will and therefore divine knowledge, but really the reason or way I know those things, that they must be the case, is because of what manifests in the world. Knowledge manifests, will manifests in the world, and therefore I have a portion of will, whatever that portion is, and I have therefore knowledge as well, because it manifests in the world, and therefore I can know he must then therefore have divine will or absolute will and absolute knowledge. So the two are go hand in hand.
Jazakallah khairan. So yes, like I think the fact that I can know and the fact that I can choose proves that there's an all-knowing one, there's a divine determining. There's one who chooses things, And so Ashanur and Abdurrahman also says, I think the fourth point makes the third one more clear. Divine knowledge is a further proof, or it supports the existence of human choice, will, because there must be something to be known. People seem to be having a good grasp of this part. I'm still having some parts not clearly connected. Especially this divine knowledge is connected with our will. This part I couldn't get like completely. But let's hear Yusuf and then Suhail one more time, inshallah.
So there are two ways that this can be understood. One is divine determining is connected to the fact that I am given with the power of choice. The second way to get this sentence is divine determining is connected to what I choose. So language is a little bit ambiguous here.
Oh, Yusuf, I apologize. Could you repeat both slower, please?
Okay. So divine knowledge is connected to my power of choice, like the fact that I am given power of choice is what is within divine knowledge. The second thing is divine knowledge is connected with my choices, like the use of this choice in certain ways. I am checking, it looks like in the original language also, there is some sort of ambiguity, which way the author is meant. But Ashanur Abdurrahman's comment in there, in here, as far as I can see, which again, we can read the fourth and come back to the third again, because I'm not crystal clear here either. So we are talking about divine knowledge, knowing something, and the something that is known is what? Me choosing things, or me being given that tool of choice. So I am, if I take it the first way, I was determined to have choice. This is the first understanding. I was determined to have power of choice. So there's no contradiction in here. There's one way to take it, which is clearly the case. If I take it the second way, the creator knowing my choices does not negate me having choices, but rather confirms me having choices, because the topic of knowing is my choices. So for divine knowledge to know something, that thing must exist, which in this case is being my choices. Ashanur Abdurrahman text, their message is much more succinct and explaining that point.
Okay, Jazakallah khairan. The fact that my power of choice is part of the divine determining or divine knowledge, it supports that I have power of choice, because if I didn't have power of choice, there won't be nothing to be known about my power of choice. So yeah, my choice is the object of the knowledge that is divine. Okay, now Aisha is speaking. I can clearly.
So this is very interesting, because sometimes you'll see arguments that say, okay, well, the problem between divine determining and free will is that if God knows, and I'm using this specific language because that's how it used, if God knows what is going to happen, then that knowledge is deterministic, and that knowledge makes impossible my free will. But knowledge of something, as I think Brother Yusuf was explaining, does not negate the choice that was involved that makes that event knowable. So basically what I'm taking away, and I said the fourth point because even though I think the third point is trying to make explicit the connection between human choice and divine determining, or rather how they look to one another, specifically how divine determining looks to human choice. The fourth one, I think, makes more clear the mechanisms of how that works. And I'm just going to read, not to go further ahead, but I'll just read it directly from the text. It says, knowledge is dependent on the thing known. That is, it knows it as it is. The thing known is not dependent on knowledge. So as in my comment, I wrote that my choice, human choice, is that which is known. So in order for, this might not be the best language to use, for there to be divine knowledge of something, that something must exist, in which case my choice must exist. So I just think that here Nursi is very beautifully making a very important point, because again, many people will say that divine knowledge in its connection with divine determining nullifies the existence of human choice. But here he's saying, instead of nullifying it, we should see it as a further support, as a further indication or signpost of the existence of free choice. And I think that's a very important point.
Jazakallah khairan. So since the emphasis here, whether they nullify each other or not, whether they comply with each other or not, I guess we can say that, yes, the divine knowledge or divine determining does not nullify the power of choice, but rather, if there's such thing, if divine determining includes which by definition includes whatever you choose, or the fact that you can choose, your power of choice, it's being known, it's a evidence for its existence. So there is no, let's say, a logical contradiction here. Suhail, please go ahead.
I think like the best practical example I can think of, I don't know how analogous it is to what he's saying here, but for example, like a parent says to the child, don't touch a hot stove. In other words, the parent knows the consequences of touching a hot stove, has knowledge of it, so to speak, and is aware of the child's ability to choose. So knows of the child's ability, but at the same time cannot necessarily say that their knowledge of the child's choice or ability to choose to touch a hot stove is determined. In other words, it's not so predetermined or deterministic. In that, a better word is, it's not fatalistic. It's not because that they knew that the child can choose to touch a hot stove, it's going to happen. They knew it's possible. It's in the realm of possibility, and then the child choose. But that's one perspective. That's one lens. That's from the perspective of the parent. But from the perspective of the child, and I think that's what's important, is that the child knows that they can choose and therefore chooses. And when they choose to touch a hot stove, does it become known to them that the stove is hot? In other words, they didn't know until they made the choice to know. Otherwise, they couldn't know. That's the point of that. That's what knowledge is. In other words, knowledge necessarily implies that something is unknown and then it becomes known by the mechanism of choice. So in that regard, those two things are interlinked. From the perspective of the child, they're interlinked, and also from the perspective of the parent. But the parent's knowledge of the child's choice doesn't necessitate that the child's going to choose to touch or not touch the stove. It's the best analogy I can think of. Maybe there's a better analogy, or maybe it's not even applicable. But that is what I took away, at least my limited understanding.
Jazakallah khairan. Yusuf, he raised his hand. I assume he will show us how your example was a bad example, and then we can stop there. Just kidding.
No.
Go ahead, please.
So the power of choice is not opposed to divine determining. So how do I confirm that, right? So divine determining, as I think about it, is, since we are discussing about it from the very beginning, I do observe everything and I attribute it to the creator, right? Now I look at my free choice, like the power of choice itself, not my choices yet, but I'm just looking at this tool that is given to me. So this very existence of that tool, is it contradicting divine determining, or the existence of that tool, can I attribute it to a divine knowledge? Like this was very well, within a measure, a created being. Just as I would attribute the very well-ordered being of a tree to divine determining, because very proportionately within a perfect order, that tree is created. So the very existence within order of that tree is supporting that divine, this is part of divine determining, like the creator created this within an order, within a measure. So divine determining must exist. And since the divine determining is existing, manifestations of it is as existing everywhere, which is also supporting the idea of this tree is also within that measure, within that knowledge. Now apply the same thing to power of choice. You are investigating Birkan, let's say, and you are seeing that Birkan's eyes, Birkan's nose, everything is a evidence for divine determining, because you see the order and measure and everything, and say that the one who made these eyes and nose and everything within that proportions and order and wisdom must be all-knowing one.
All beautiful one.
All beautiful one. And then flip it, you say that, oh, the one, all-knowing one must, his knowledge is also supporting or is not contradicting things are within order. The all knowledgeable one's knowledge is in corroboration with or confirms the order that I observe in Birkan. How about Birkan's power of choice? If you look at Birkan's life and see within the purpose of Birkan's creation, how perfectly it fits that Birkan is given that tool of power of choice, you would say that, oh, the one who created Birkan with eyes and nose and everything is knowingly, purposefully put that tool, power of choice, to here as well. Actually, it is within perfect order, perfect measure, within the purpose of Birkan's creation. So in this regard, now I am taking in the emphasis in the third point is the power of choice, not the choices yet, I think. Because in the fourth, he's going to talk about the choices that the power of choice makes. But in the third, the very existence of this black box, if you like, is perfectly supported by, I mean, not contradicting, but supported by the divine determining that manifestations of which I observe everywhere.
Jazakallah khairan. That was a really great point and distinction between the existence of power of choice, the power of choice as a, you said black box, or as a faculty, as an entity, and the choices that power of choice follows, or practices, or chooses. We will see, which one of these verbs better fits, or maybe another one, to our existence, our true nature. But it is two different things, and we should study at multiple levels. First, the very existence of power of choice as a faculty. Does it contradict with the divine determining or not? And as you said, it perfectly fits with the divine determining. We see that human being having a power of choice is in a perfect harmony with the rest of the universe, rest of the creation. Jazakallah khairan. So I guess it's a great time to stop with all these beautiful comments. Jazakallah khairan. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم وآخر دعواهم الحمد لله رب العالمين. الفاتحة.